So finally we have the epic finale of the Yi Sun-shin trilogy, giving us the epic Battle of Noryang, known as being the battle that ended at dawn. So I remember watching the Admiral Run Occurrence back when it came out 10 years ago at this point, which is crazy. And I remember liking it a lot when it came out. It was a great historical drama, and when I rewatched it, it was still just as good. And what's ultimately important about the film is that it made me interested to look up the history. The Imjin War is fascinating, and of course the legend himself, Yi Sun-shin, really an incredible man. So Noryang Deadly Sea released in 2023, coming out a year after Rising Dragon, and 9 years after the first film. And that wait was even longer if you live in the States like me. And after the first film, it wouldn't be until 8 years later that we'd get the prequel. And honestly, I didn't even know about these last two films until recently. Otherwise, I would have covered them when they came out. I'm not sure, maybe it didn't release in the States until recently. But I will say, after watching all three of them, as a whole, this was a really good trilogy. It wasn't perfect, but it was still just great cinema. And I could say it's one of the best historical epics, which unfortunately we really don't get much of anymore. So this final film focuses on the Battle of Noryang. This was the last major battle of the Imjin War, and the climax of that entire war, so it's very significant. And this is just a much easier battle to adapt into a good movie storyline, which really just allowed this movie to be free of the numerous narrative problems that plagued the previous film, Hansan Rising Dragon. The big problem with that film was that the historical battle that it was covering was, for the most part, uneventful. So the director really had to struggle to come up with ways to make it more dramatic for a film. But luckily for this film, the historical accounts of the Battle of Noryang are on the lighter side. At least the finer details are. So that gives it plenty of room for creative liberty. For example, there's nothing in historical records that describe the Koreans deploying hwacha during this battle. Hwacha being essentially what is a rocket launcher but with arrows. So just that along with turtle ships are some of the awesome weapons that Korea invented. Also in this film, we see the Japanese using captured cannons to sink the turtle ships, but there's nothing to suggest that they didn't do that, so it's fair game. So it's free from the historical restrictions that we saw in the previous film, that was with Yi Sun-shin's famous crane wing formation. So because of that, the director was just able to let his imagination run wild with this one. And I do commend him for just delivering some blood-pumping battle sequences. Also, most of the characters acted in a logical manner this time, and the battle tactics and counter-tactics were very sensible and convincing, both of which make for an enjoyable, watchable experience. I will say that the setup for this film did have me a little bored in the beginning, but I like how the filmmakers were almost feeling the same way. So they really shortened the setup part in this film. It takes up really only the first hour, and then it just gets straight to the battle, which lasts until the end of the film. So it really just gets straight to the point. Because really the battle sequences were the best part of the previous two films. Especially the second film, that one felt like it suffered pacing issues. It had a very lengthy setup. In fact, that film probably would have been better if it was just 2 hours of just a battle. And I will say with this film, because the battle is so long, and it is a majority of the film, it gives it this very epic feeling to it. And again, I would have loved to have seen this one in the IMAX. It does occasionally become a bit dramatic in certain scenes, but really just given the context and significance of this battle, it is justified. And the battle did have a really good level of suspense. I was definitely engaged. But I will say that it doesn't look that nice to look at all the time. And one of the reasons for that is that it was filmed at night, but that was historical, as it was known as the battle that ended at dawn. But there was a bit too much CGI at times. For some reason, the previous film actually looked better to me. I felt like it hid the CGI better. I also noticed that CGI gives films a really dull look for some reason. It's one of the effects. And it sort of gets rid of color. I've definitely noticed that with newer films. As for the acting, now we have Kim Yoon-seok stepping into the shoes of the character of Yi. Kim is a brilliant actor. I loved him in The Chaser. And he definitely nails the stoicism and look of Yi Sun-shin. And it's kind of funny because that's really all the character needs. You know, he sort of was a legend, so, you know, he has to be stoic. Still, I do like Choi Min-sik's portrayal the best, and it's unfortunate that he never came back. But still, Kim does do a good job in this. He gives us a man that has hardened with many years of battle, but still his eyes are just full of sorrow and pain. And all the actors do a good job in this. The army, Yi, the whole dynamic with Yi and his son. I thought that was very emotional, and it gave it an emotional touch to an otherwise bloody and dark film. The runtime itself may turn some people off, but I felt like it worked for this. It's sort of the last hurrah for Yi and all these characters and just this war. Also, some new characters were introduced. This includes the main commander, Chen Lin. And even though everything ultimately leads to war and bloodshed in films like this, it is still nice to see another nation being represented here. Brings about interesting dialogues and just adds more flavor to the overarching narrative. Once again, the nationalism is on full display in this film, but I don't see that as a bad thing. You could be proud of your nation. And also just seeing nations come together to overcome a greater evil, it doesn't get more classic than that. So overall, this film combines the drama and melodrama that helped push the first film, and it takes some more war-driven elements from the second film, Hansan. And it actually pushes the envelope even bigger with this epic battle. Makes for one brutal and emotionally satisfying conclusion to Yi's epic naval battle journey. This last film not only sees the end of a great saga, but it brings up a really great question. And I'm sure fans are wanting to know what that answer is. And that's, what's next for director Kemp. Hopefully it's another historical epic, but, whatever it could be, I look forward to watching. Anyway, what did you guys think of this trilogy? Did you like this last film? And what's your favorite film out of all of them? Thanks for being on this journey with me, and like always, thanks for watching.